Have you ever wondered what causes the different shapes of the moon? We all know that its appearance changes over time. If you have looked into the night sky, you may have noticed the moon appears to change shape each night. Some nights, the moon might look like a narrow crescent. Other nights, the moon might look like a bright circle. And on other nights, you might not be able to see the moon at all. The different shapes of the moon that we see at different times of the month are called the moon's phases. Moon phases in order. There are 8 total phases of the moon cycle, 4 primary and 4 secondary. New moon. Waxing crescent moon. First quarter moon. Waxing gibbous moon. Full moon. Waning gibbous moon. Third quarter moon. Waning crescent moon. Orbital period of moon. The moon displays these 8 phases one after the other as it moves through its cycle each month. It takes about 27.3 days for the moon to orbit Earth. However, because of how sunlight hits the moon, it takes about 29.5 days to go from one new moon to the next new moon. To understand the phases, let's take a look at the time lapse of phases of the 12 moons of the year. Why does this happen? The shape of the moon isn't changing throughout the month. However, our view of the moon does change. The moon does not produce its own light. There is only one source of light in our solar system, and that is the sun. Without the sun, our moon would be completely dark. What you may have heard referred to as moonlight is actually just sunlight reflecting off of the moon's surface. The sun's light comes from one direction, and it always illuminates, or lights up, one half of the moon, the side of the moon that is facing the sun. The other side of the moon is dark. On Earth, our view of the illuminated part of the moon changes each night, depending on where the moon is in its orbit, or path, around Earth. phases. In our entire solar system, the only object that shines with its own light is the sun. That light always beams onto Earth and Moon from the direction of the sun, illuminating half of our planet in its orbit and reflecting off the surface of the Moon to create moonlight. Like Earth, the Moon has a day side and a night side, which change as the Moon rotates. The sun always illuminates half of the Moon while the other half remains dark, but how much we are able to see of that illuminated half changes as the Moon travels through its orbit. Let's take a look at the individual phases, and how the movements of the Moon and Sun appear to us as we watch from the northern hemisphere on Earth. New Moon. This is the invisible phase of the Moon, with the illuminated side of the Moon facing the Sun and the night side facing Earth. In this phase, the Moon is in the same part of the sky as the Sun and rises and sets with the Sun. Not only is the illuminated side facing away from the Earth, it's also up during the day. Remember, in this phase, the Moon doesn't usually pass directly between Earth and the Sun, due to the inclination of the Moon's orbit. It only passes near the Sun from our perspective on Earth. Moon at waxing crescent phase. This silver sliver of a moon occurs when the illuminated half of the Moon faces mostly away from Earth, with only a tiny portion visible to us from our planet. It grows daily as the Moon's orbit carries the Moon's dayside farther into view. Every day, the Moon rises a little bit later. Moon at first quarter phase. The Moon is now a quarter of the way through its monthly journey and you see half of its illuminated side. People may casually call this a half moon, but remember, that's not really what you're witnessing in the sky. You're seeing just a slice of the entire Moon, half of the illuminated half. A first quarter moon rises around noon and sets around midnight. It's high in the sky in the evening and makes for excellent viewing. Moon at waxing gibbous phase. Now most of the Moon's dayside has come into view, and the Moon appears brighter in the sky. Moon at full moon phase. This is as close as we come to seeing the Sun's illumination of the entire day side of the Moon, so, technically, this would be the real half moon. The Moon is opposite the Sun, as viewed from Earth, revealing the Moon's dayside. A full moon rises around sunset and sets around sunrise. The Moon will appear full for a couple of days before it moves into Moon at waning gibbous phase. As the Moon begins its journey back toward the Sun, the opposite side of the Moon now reflects the Moon's light. The lighted side appears to shrink, but the Moon's orbit is simply carrying it out of view from our perspective. The Moon rises later and later each night. Moon at last quarter phase. The Moon looks like it's half illuminated from the perspective of Earth, but really you're seeing half of the Moon that's illuminated by the Sun, or a quarter. A last quarter moon, also known as a third quarter moon, rises around midnight and sets around noon. Moon at waning crescent phase. The Moon is nearly back to the point in its orbit where its dayside directly faces the Sun, and all that we see from our perspective is a thin curve. The summary. The way the Moon looks to us is continually changing. It moves across the sky rapidly over the course of a night. And from night to night it rises and falls at different times and in different parts of the sky. Most vividly, its entire appearance changes over the course of 2 weeks, morphing from a bright circle to a circle sliced in half and finally fading to nothing.